Today we're going to talk about breaking down silos between security and infrastructure. And so I'm going to assume that when you're looking through the session catalog and you see this title, there may or may not be things that you're struggling with in your own cloud journey, trying to find ways to incorporate security into the infrastructure pipelines, like as you're trying to accelerate as fast as possible to cloud in a safe and secure way. So the one thing that the session description really didn't say specifically, but we're talking about what works in a regulated environment. Like how do you actually incorporate security into the plans that infrastructure has to migrate and do it in a safe way. Like go fast, but do so in a very safe way. And so my name is Jessie Skibby. I'm going to talk to you in another slide or two about who I am. I'm with AWS, and I lead a team of assessors, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I also have Ajish and Akshay with State Street, and they're going to come up on stage here in about 15, 20 minutes and share a lot more insight on what's worked for them, how their operating model has changed, and a little bit more about their journey. So I'm really excited to get through my piece and then bring up the real stars of the show and have them share their story with you so that you can put some real live scenarios with what I'm going to take you through. So again, once we talk through, I gave the introductions. I'm going to dive a little bit more into the team of people that I lead. But today, in this 60 minutes, we're going to go through kind of talking about scalable security governance and how do you break down the silos between infrastructure and security to build that out. We're going to talk through some of the management and governance services, so some of the services that AWS offers that may help you on that journey to scalable cloud governance. And then we'll bring up our State Street. We have a director with infrastructure and one with security to talk about how they have been working together to build at scale for State Street. All right, so I thought it was a little important to share about what I do. So I have been with AWS for a little over 6 years, and I built a pretty unique team within AWS. So we provide professional services to customers that are migrating to the cloud. We have helped somewhere around, 250 or so regulated customers over the years be able to accelerate their compliance outcomes, their security, and governance at scale. And so this is a little bit more about how we do that. We're a global entity. We help customers adopt AWS services, and we do that with a team of industry certified auditors. Like not a lot of people know that we have this entity where we work with customers on their side of the shared responsibility model, and we make sure that as they're adopting the cloud, security governance can also happen at scale. So the concept of GRC engineering, everything in a cloud environment is code, so think about how beneficial it is that you have all of your security, risk, and compliance controls as part of those pipelines, and how that can help you build over time more of a guardrail versus a gate scenario where you have those controls and they're automatic. And so what do we really do? This is what's interesting. So when I was putting this session together, I'm like, yes, I can talk all day about what my team does, why do customers hire us, like what do we really do? But what we really do is help build a bridge between infrastructure and security. And what's interesting about this is that when I started the team that I started 6.5 years ago, I was thinking about it from a compliance lens, right? But everything in a cloud environment is code. Everything is technical. So how do you make sure that those very non-technical control descriptions and security outcomes that you have to meet, how do you turn those into very technical architecture and technical engineering implementations? And when your infrastructure team within your organization is working really hard on their own transformation, right? You're going from an on-prem or going from a multi-cloud environment, how do you make sure that when you're going through this transformation, security and compliance are moved as far left? Like people say that it's actually achievable in a cloud environment, like translating those non-technical control descriptions to technical implementations and building those guardrails over gates. And so why do we need to even build a bridge, or why do we have to break down silos between infrastructure and security? Well, if you look at it through the lens of where behavior is driven by key performance indicators, goals, and outcomes. And if you think about what the infrastructure team really has to do, like what are the most important things for the infrastructure team to do, versus what is the security team focusing on, right? So unless in your organization you have aligned goals where the infrastructure team has very specific security targets and vice versa, there could be a misalignment, a misunderstanding in that operating model. And so one of the things that we work to help our customers with is building that right operating model so that you have roles and responsibilities defined, shared goals that can be understood by both teams, and that's going to help you move a lot faster. So the infrastructure team may be focused on system uptime and performance, whereas security is thinking about protecting the organizational assets. And not that these are directly conflicting, it's meant to show the reason why it happens in a lot of organizations, right? Because we really need to bring security into what the infrastructure team is doing. And so thinking about it from an overall governance model, this is a very busy slide. And if you're in a regulated environment, this will be familiar to you in some capacity. And so along the left, we're talking about what drives the compliance need, what drives the security outcome need is laws, regulations, frameworks, and alignment. And oh, by the way, this number that I came across the other day, there's like 135 different global privacy and data protection laws. Like, just think about the magnitude. If you're in a regulated environment and you're doing business globally, there's a tremendous amount of pressure on you to make sure that what you're building in your cloud environment meets those regulatory requirements. So that's kind of at the top. And so when you're in the regulated environment, one of the ways to accelerate is, like I said, breaking down those walls between security and infrastructure, making sure they're working together under a similar governance and structure. And so moving down, because we're starting at the top, first line of defense going down, you have all kinds of things like your governance standards, your policies, your procedures. Then you identify your controls. But you really haven't yet done the translation into the technical need, right? So you understand what you need to do, but how you're doing it and the tactical implementation has not been defined yet. And so then you get into controls automation. I'm going to share with you a couple of the AWS services that you can actually leverage to automate some of those controls. And then you have security, risk, and compliance performing that second line of defense and monitoring. And at the very end of the third line of defense, of course, is the governance and oversight, the verification, the validation that things are in place. And one of the great benefits of breaking down the silos between whether it's application teams, security teams, and infrastructure teams, one of the great benefit of doing that collaboratively is making sure that the code that you're implementing can be assessed, right? So the entire cycle of governance, risk, and compliance can be automated as much as possible, removing a lot of that manual effort from the process. And so one of the ways we think about this at AWS is security guardians. And so I'm not sure if anyone's heard of security guardians. We talk a lot about this publicly. It's one of the ways that AWS scales. And we found that leveraging the similar model within our customers is something that will help our customers scale the same way it's helped AWS scale. So why doesn't security scale? This slide right here, this very pink slide, describes kind of why when you're first going through your cloud migration journey or you're really working at scale. The product team humans, so the people on the left, those are all your builders, your development teams, your people building cloud architecture. And then you have the central security team. So right in a regulated environment, you have to go through like an AppSec process or some sort of final review of what the developers have built. And the ratio may be 1 to 10, it may be 2 to 100. And what happens if you don't have security that scales, then you get, I should have been holding the clicker. You get this blocked, right? If you don't think about how you're building security in from the start, your final gate is going to be shut, right? Not being able to move to production because you haven't met all the security controls. And so I think this slide right here is probably everything. Like, why should you break down silos between infrastructure, you could put application teams in that sense as well, and security. And so having security in the ideal situation is that you have a scalable model, and this represents what we've publicly talked about as the Security Guardians model at AWS, where you have more of a distributed security model, where you have your central security org enabling a security guardian on the builder team that's able to connect directly with the security team and understand what the requirements are for launch. And so the idea is by the time you get to the central security team AppSec process, you have what you need built in and you get through that process a lot faster. And so wrapping the governance model around this, we do compliance to tell the story of good security. And so if you have the right requirements understood, and if your central security org and your compliance teams are enabling your infrastructure teams, then you get much faster throughput to production. That is the concept. So how can you accelerate in a regulated environment? So what's interesting is that I lead a compliance team for AWS. The individual that hires us isn't usually security. What we get hired and we get obviously requested by the infrastructure team. And so my number one is invite security, because if security isn't part of those initial planning sessions in your migration to cloud, then we're not going to be able to make this scalable structure together. Security needs to be invited in, part of the conversation. Talking about it earlier with our customer that's going to come on stage in a minute, you think about it like security being a product feature. Like whatever you're building, whatever the infrastructure team is building, we really need to think about security as a primary product feature that has to be there before launch. And then creating shared goals between security and infrastructure, driving clarity. Because there has to be clear goals and shared goals that the teams are working towards to drive the right behavior. And then adapting traditional security frameworks to cloud-native environments. This non-technical to technical translation is harder than you think. I think if anybody in this room has done this, like how do you take a control that talks about, well, I mean, encryption of data at rest might be easy, but some of them are less easy. And so you have to be able to do the work of translating those requirements into either deployable code or maybe service by service level configuration guidance, so that as a security team, hopefully most of you in the room are security teams, this is a security event. The idea is that you're doing this translation and you're empowering your infrastructure and applications teams to be successful, because that would be the way that they would look at security as an enabler to the accelerated cloud migration. And then incorporating it into an agile infrastructure deployment mechanism. It has to be a part of the pipeline. It has to, security, compliance has the ability to be part of that pipeline. And so things like policy as code can prevent something from launching. And that's your proactive security control. Speaking of security controls, hopefully your organization is not operating entirely in spreadsheets, and hopefully your organization is not operating with screenshots as evidence, because we've graduated from that. In the cloud environment, there's a lot of opportunities to advance from that and really move on. You still need the control requirements, but the way you translate them is what I'm going to talk about next, including how the control is tested. So here's an example of what it looks like in Control Tower. As I think of Control Tower as, think about like a first line opportunity to say, here are the policy checks that I want to have every time this infrastructure is deployed. So this is an example here of limit network access. And within Control Tower, you can apply managed controls. Again, we've done a lot of the legwork for you, translating the non-technical to technical within Control Tower. So you have preventative controls, proactive controls, detective controls. And so this is one way that security can help do this translation, make sure those are in place, so that infrastructure is enabled to deploy this. And the business outcome is that you safely control through internet access from AWS, in this case of limit network access. And then also on the Control Tower dashboard, you can see at a high level how many controls have been implemented, how many detective controls, proactive controls. So this is just an example of one of the AWS services that can help you in how you scale security through your infrastructure teams. Control Tower now has 760 controls available to you, and covering 75 services and 15 control objectives. Now, a managed control, if you're not familiar with that, that is a control that AWS, of course, manages. We also do the mapping for you. So if NIST 853 is in scope for you, or PCI DSS, these managed controls we've done the translation, the technical to non-technical translation for you. So when you go into Control Tower and select these, you can do so by the non-technical control, which is really nice. And of course, it's super important to think about, with everything with security, it's about how many walls or obstacles do you put up. You know, having the right detective, preventative, and proactive controls available through Control Tower should be a part of your strategy. And then business outcomes that you really want to get to, and again, it seems like some extra work to do in the very beginning, but think about it in the sense of taking the time to plan and make sure that non-technical to technical controls can be translated. You've empowered infrastructure teams with what they need to be successful, thinking in terms of guardrails over gates, right? You don't want to be the Department of No in security. You want to understand how you can enable. And so things that we see when customers do this well are reduction in errors, reduction in cost, reduction in time. Even though it may take you a slightly more time in the beginning of your journey, the scalable impact is huge. To be able to address new requirements, like I mentioned, there are 135-ish different laws and regulations that are continuously changing. The agility in the organization to make these changes has to be scalable. All right, with that, I would love to invite Ajish and Akshay up to the stage. They would have graciously agreed to share a little bit more about State Street and the journey that they have been on in working together. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and go ahead and get started.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Akshay, and I'm responsible for cloud platforms at the bank.
Hey, I'm Ajish George. I manage security architecture and engineering at State Street.
Thank you, Jesse. Let me give you a quick overview of State Street in general, and then we'll dive into some of the best practices and some of the things we have done in our multi-cloud journey. State Street is a 230-year-old bank headquartered in Boston. We are one of the 8 GSIBs in the United States. GSIB is a globally systemically important bank, right? And if you look at this chart here, we have about 46.7 trillion with a T assets under custody and administration, right? That kind of equates to about 11.5% of the world's assets. So think about the scale that we operate in, right? And so security is so paramount because we are a custodial bank, and hence the fiduciary responsibility we have is very, very important to us, right? And to be able to make sure the trust our clients put in us, security is paramount. Extremely, extremely important, right? At this scale. We are not a retail bank. A lot of people come to me and say, hey, we don't see State Street all over the place like JPMC or Wells Fargo or Bank of America. We are a bank which serves institutional investors. So our product lines are more into investment servicing, investment management, wealth management, as well as global markets and financing. So we do service most retirement funds, pension funds, insurance companies, asset managers, so on and so forth. And that's why you don't see us all over the place, right? I just wanted to make sure that's clear because I often get that question. Also, because we are a GCFI or a GSIB bank, we are too big to fail, like Citibank or any other large banks in the United States. Because of we being a GSIB, we have extra supervisory controls which are required for us to adhere, including can we absorb more loss? How do we resolve ourselves? Example, when Lehman went down, there's this whole problem because Lehman was so interconnected with the economic infrastructure of the, globally, that people didn't know how to recoup and how to resolve. So resolvability is so important, and that's another factor. So we being a GSIB, there is extra focus on us in terms of the heightened security and risk management practices that we have to adhere to. Getting to the next chart, cloud and AI. I have to say AI because AI is all over the place. Cloud and AI are sort of cornerstones of our technology strategy in general. And the strategy is driven primarily to reduce risk, significant risk reduction, resiliency, and more importantly, drive agility and innovation, thereby bringing more product services to the global investment community as well as to our clients. That's key of our strategy. We have adopted a multi-cloud strategy, as you would imagine, with two hyperscalers, and I would say the third one as well, because we are dependent upon the IBM mainframe, which I call the first cloud. So that's another cloud we have, not only AWS and Azure, but even the IBM mainframe being one of the cloud providers, right? That's how I look at it. Nonetheless, we have a multi-cloud strategy, and what we are doing right now is we're in the midst of a multi-year journey to transition to the cloud. To operate at this scale, we run probably about 60 plus data centers and 2,000 plus applications and about 6 to 7 different landing zones across clouds today, just because of the nature of the scale and the opportunistic way some of these clouds have spurned in the bank because of mergers, acquisitions, etc. We have to make sure that we are able to manage the cloud sprawl as well. And to that effect, we have taken a cloud center of excellence approach. A lot of you will be familiar with that. And with that approach, we look at sort of the cloud center of excellence in 3 work streams. The cloud platform engineering team, which many of you may be part of. The cloud business office, looking at more governance, FinOps, and things like that, training, enablement, etc. And the last aspect is a cloud leadership team, which really drives governance and cloud strategy, right? Interestingly, our core cloud landing zones, we have like 6 or 7 landing zones. Few of them have come through acquisitions, and they were built opportunistically. But the core landing zones we have, where most of our applications are migrating to, the basic principle of those landing zones is self-service and to drive developer autonomy. And my friend here would kill me if I didn't say that we want to drive autonomy, but with guardrails, so that people don't fall off the track. Right? And that's where Ajish and his team come into the picture, where we partner together, and we always look at cloud being a product. Right? It's a product platform-centric mindset, where if I am the product owner of the cloud, I look at security being a feature of the product and not being a separate conversation at all. So the whole point Jesse was trying to make is invite security. I don't invite security, because in my mind, he is part of, or Ajish's team is part of what we deliver to our customers collectively. Whether they are internal customers or external doesn't really matter, right? So that's key. We look at cloud as a platform, as a product. One thing we have done is, because of the scale and the fact that we have 7 different landing zones, we've adopted something called a cloud capability model or a cloud platform model, which is divided into like 8 or 9 domains and subdomains. And the reason we did that was because we needed a common business language to talk across AWS, across Azure, across our own landing zones, because we have about 3 in Azure and 3 in AWS, right? It gives us a common capability model to talk about capabilities and maturity of those capabilities as a common language across clouds, right? And that's also the intersection point of how the security teams work with us, because if you look at a cloud, right, literally, it's like a virtual data center. You have so many dials and knobs to tune and turn. You don't know which one to turn, which one to not turn. It's like you're sitting in a cockpit of a 787 and you're trying to figure out, hey, what should I do, right? Because you have to tune so many different things and configure so many things in the cloud, right? And hence, it's very important for us to have a structured approach in terms of how we look at cloud capabilities in general, including all the security capabilities, identity and access management, network segmentation, data loss prevention, and so on and so forth. There are many more, right? And so the cloud platform model gives us a structured approach where we have a common business language or capability language to talk through and figure out how capabilities, including security capabilities, are maturing in our different landing zones, right? That's key. I think one of the other things Jesse brought up was, like I said, we look at like cloud as a product, and we look at also our cloud landing zones as an application. And as soon as you think about that as an application, the conversation changes. Why? Because you could look at a cloud team where the cloud team is 1-800 Akshay, can you provision a VM for us? Versus we saying, hey, here is a service catalog of services, go use it, don't worry about it. You don't have to call me, just use it in a self-service model. But I want to assure that all the different aspects of controls are all built in, so nothing will go wrong, and we know the sort of the contours of what people can do and cannot do, right? The other aspect is, while we looked at the cloud platform model, it was very important for us to sort of baseline our cloud controls framework, right? So what we did was we looked at the Cloud Security Alliance's Cloud Control Matrix 4.0, which is what we have baselined as our cloud controls framework, right? And that's what we follow and adhere to across all our landing zones. That's another key element of that. As far as policy as code is concerned, Jesse spoke about it. Whether it's Azure, we use Azure policy, or if it's AWS, we use a combination of Control Tower, AWS Config, SCPs, and OPA policies to ensure that we deploy preventative, detective, as well as proactive controls, right? But the philosophy we use is we want to prevent as much as possible and shift left rather than detect and then do policing later on, right? So the more you prevent, the better you are, essentially, right? Jesse talked about security guardians, which I think Ajish will have a little more add color on, is security guardians have to be participating both within the app side as well as on the platform side. Because we look at platform as an app as well, because everything is through code, right? Nothing is ClickOps. We don't allow ClickOps in our environment. We want to make sure everything is in Git and everything is deployed as a pipeline, as code, so we can go back to it. Nothing is configured with ClickOps in general, unless there is a break glass scenario, of course, right? With that, let me transition to Ajish, and then we can have our Q&A.
Sure. So as Akshay explained, our organization is on a multi-year transformational journey, trying to migrate from an organization that's majority deployed on-premise to an organization that's majority deployed on the cloud, right? As security, we've been going through a lot of transformations ourselves, right? We started this journey 3-4 years ago, insourcing a lot of security capabilities, building out key security functions, modernizing a lot of the technology and processes so that we can bring more modern, more industry standard security capabilities to bear to protect the enterprise that Akshay talked about. Hey, we're managing a lot of risk for the global financial system. So how do we make sure that that's done in a measured way, in a way that our regulators can take comfort with, that we can evidence readily and regularly, as we're called to do often. So a lot of the cloud migration for us was figuring out how to work with the various stakeholders, right? We've gone through a lot of evolution in this space. We started with, as Akshay mentioned, a very disconnected cloud world, right? We had different or sub-organizations maintaining their own cloud footprints. We partnered with our cloud leadership team to bring them all under centralized governance. We worked as a security team to make sure that we had standards that were mapped to frameworks that we adhere to, and made sure that they were in turn aligned to frameworks like CCM that were adopted by the CLT. We worked to make sure that those requirements were translated into meaningful requirements for the teams that were implementing systems in the cloud. And we wanted to make sure that as many of the requirements were shifted left as far as possible. So we wanted to make sure that we had security by design and default in all of the landing zones that were coming up. So we set about working with each of the platform teams to get our security engineers indexed with folks that were designing policy as code, designing the landing zones, designing the services that would be enabled. We set about making sure that the services that were turned on would be hardened on day one. We wanted to make sure that we had logging, monitoring in place, right? As a security organization, we had to evolve too, right? We started changing from models where we had a SIM in a corner, a couple of ops people chasing compliance issues with various tools, to one where we started aggregating the broader picture of the attack surface, the broader picture of logs and threats that were emergent in this space, and bringing holistic views together so our operations teams, our engineering teams could partner with application owners, cloud platform leaders to take timely action against these issues. So this has been an ongoing and evolving journey, right? And as we work with the cloud platform teams, our operating model with them has evolved as well, right? We as security, started in a place where, hey, we have a lot of infrastructure across the organization. Everything from traditional mainframes to mid-ranges that were in vogue 50 years ago to cloud-native digital architectures. And for us, the security of all of it is important. We look at the cloud as an opportunity rather than as a risk. I've seen a lot of my colleagues in security call out, hey, cloud, how are you going to manage all the risks? How do you see all of the problems and threats in the cloud? I actually see it as an opportunity in the sense that cloud gives you unparalleled visibility and unparalleled control at the fine-grained level in terms of what you deploy, what you can log, what you can observe, what you can monitor, what you can respond to. And it gives us the ability to take security frameworks and build a level of automation and orchestration you could not do in a traditional sysadmin managed on-premise environment. So we are in the process of maturing our security posture, making sure that all of this new capability gets indexed with our security requirements, gets us to a place where we not only have this visibility, but we also have that control, and we can take the friction away from the application teams and the platform teams and allow the organization to innovate at a faster pace, and get to a position where security and compliance doesn't become an afterthought, doesn't become a, hey, somebody's chasing us to go do this, so I better, but rather that's something that's embedded into the products that we deliver.
Yeah. I want to go back to something really quickly, because I want to, first of all, just thank you both for being willing to share some of your story and to answer some questions for all of us, but 53,000 employees worldwide at State Street. This is no easy task. Cloud migration and changing of behaviors and moving through what the two of you have moved through over the past couple of years together is pretty incredible. So I just wanted to highlight that from just a sheer magnitude perspective. But I actually have a question for the audience that I wanted to ask first. How many of you are on a security team today, kind of going through some of this? You're on security. So Akshay, you're significantly outnumbered in this room. And so
we are part of the same family. We deliver products together.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of see. So how many of you are kind of going through this struggle in a regulated environment today? Okay, good. We're definitely going to be on the side over here answering questions at the end. So I just wanted to share that. If we don't get through, I have some questions for the two of them. I went too far. But if there's something that we don't address, I want to welcome you at the side at the end. All right, so the reason why we have two trains leaving the station is because I kind of think of the two of them. Cloud migration starts. Two trains leave the station. Do they go in the same direction? Does one go off over here? The concept here is that we have to get there together and get there fast and get there safely.
Yes.
And so doing that in an accelerated way requires deep partnership with security and your infrastructure, your applications team. All right, so I wanted to ask, I know, Akshay, you talked a little bit earlier about the operating model. I wanted to ask both of you, how has the operating model between the two changed, right? I know we talked about how it is today, but what would you say to people in the audience that are struggling with this today? maybe some key lessons learned and why you knew the operating model had to change.
Can I take it first?
Sure. I think every time when we really started our structured cloud journey, we had cloud landing zones being built from like 2017, right? 2017. And we really started structuring it appropriately around 2022. I think there's a time which comes where you have to realize and recognize that if you want to achieve things at scale, something needs to change. And what needs to change is a big question, and that's driven through how the organizations are structured and the influence barriers that are there and the friction which is already there, and how do you circumvent that? Why? Because often what people don't realize is if you look at our firm, we have 2,000 plus applications, right? So it's not that you switch a button and everything goes to the cloud the next day. You have to be in a transitionary period for 5 or 6 years before everything can get to the cloud. And that's the journey we are on. During that transition, there are going to be assets which are going to be on-prem in a hybrid model. They're going to be on the cloud, and we still have to protect all of them. And you can't just say, I'm going to do policy as code in the cloud, but on-prem I don't care because I don't care. Because they're still driving revenue streams for you. So the operating model has to literally change as you transition, as you mature through the journey, right? And part of the transition in the operating model, in my mind, fundamentally is 2 or 3 things. One, we as leaders always want to do shift left, shift left, shift left, right? Shift more to the left. What are the developers saying? How much am I going to do? Because my business wants to prioritize business feature functions more than security and resiliency. It's just not security, there's a resiliency aspect as well. How do you train the organization and the development community and the product owners where they consider security as the business feature function? That's fundamental to me, because if you really need to get into a model where you're agile, you are running fast at a faster pace and with velocity, that's the mindset you need to have with the product owners, that security and resiliency is an integral feature equivalent to a business feature function. I think that's fundamental in my mind. So shift left can be only driven if you get to that point of people understanding that security is a part of what you're doing. Second aspect then is the engineering culture and the mindset. Very, very important, right? Like Ajish mentioned, when we started our journey, some of our clouds were built by traditional systems admins, and I'm not saying good or bad. Over a period of time, what we recognized was we need to treat application landing zones as applications, right? So I was moved. I never did infrastructure in my life, by the way. I did that only since the last 4 years. I was an app developer. So I moved in from the application development organization to start doing infrastructure as code, because for a lot of the systems admins, infrastructure as code and Git and pipelines was, I don't know what you're talking about, right? It's a different mindset, right? So to be able to think that way and bring and induce that engineering culture, we had to make that change where we need to have leadership who have been engineers, right? I think that's the second fundamental change in my mind. The third aspect of the operating model I am seeing now evolving within the bank is more focus on FinOps. Very, very important, because often in large banks or even large organizations, we are not very cost conscious because we don't see the cost. So the cost transparency, is equally important. Purely from a security perspective, I would say the capability model that we created, that we had a common definition between all of us, is allowing us to look at things in a more structured manner. And that's allowing the shift where some of these security engineers are now part of our collective teams. We don't think infrastructure and security being 2 different teams, 2 different trains. This is one train which needs to tackle the hybrid environment and the transitionary environment that we are in right now, right? So these trains has to be thought about as one train running security like a team sport. And that's just my view on some of the aspects.
Can I shift gears just a teeny bit, because I feel like, Ajish, what you have to say will speak to some of the room, and you're looking at me like, what is she going to do? I'm thinking about, I bet all of you that raise your hand, like, I'm on a security team today, and you may be struggling. What was key in building your relationship with Akshay? Because I bet you everybody in the room wishes they had an infrastructure partner like Akshay. Is there anything about in the building of this operating model that you think was helpful in building that relationship with infrastructure?
I think if I reflect on where we started and where we got to, right? Like some of the key challenges, where we started as a security organization was a very compliance-oriented organization, right? Where we are now is an organization that prioritizes having empathy for the consumers of our security services, right?
Love that.
Like,
Yeah.
we are engineers.
Can you say
right?
that again? Having empathy for the consumer of your security services.
Exactly. So we tend to look at things from the perspective of the application developer, the platform developer. I've been an application developer. I've been a platform developer for 25 years. I think I used AWS's first versions when they came out in 2011. So we've been doing this for a long time. So from the consumer side, if you go look at the security problem, does somebody deploying an application in your cloud environments understand what the security requirements are? Right? Can they, translate the vast repositories of standards that most organizations have sitting around into something that are real, tangible, like policies, like code deployment pipelines, like rules that they can actually integrate into their development practices, right? And how are you as a security team enabling them to do that, right? Yeah. We started partnering with our cloud platform teams to start doing a lot of that translation. We brought folks into our security organization that were cloud engineers, that were DevOps folks, right? We started building things on the cloud ourselves. We transitioned our SIEM and other platforms into cloud native lakehouses and large-scale distributed systems. So we were not just the police for the cloud. We were also first-party clients for all the cloud services, right? We had the need to be deployed globally. We had the need to scale everywhere. So we saw firsthand the impacts of a poor operating model in terms of managing security. We wanted to make it easier not only for the application teams out there, but also easier for ourselves to consume and innovate cloud services, right? So this aligned the incentives for us, right? And helped us to speak the same language, right? Hey, how do we make this simple? How do we make this easier? Because at the end of the day, we both have to go up together, explain to our executives, explain to our regulators how we are producing a secure, compliant platform at State Street.
I think I'd just like to add one more thing. The other key thing in my mind, beyond inducing the engineering talent and everything else, is also transparency. And the fact and the notion that red is not bad. So if I'm a cloud team and I'm an infrastructure team and I'm trying to enable services, I need to participate and be transparent with Ajish in terms of how do we solve these problems. Yeah. I don't know to hide. It's us. It's one team, one problem. So red is not bad. If it's red, fine, we'll find a solution to that. It's not, I'm going to hide red till the point that it becomes transparent. Transparency is equally important, which builds the trust in the teams. Right? And that's another key thing, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I want to highlight too, I think one of the keys to both of you being such powerful champions in your organization is that you do have the engineering background that you're bringing to your role. So I guess my advice to anyone in a traditional security team, and you're not thinking about it from I loved what Ajish said about making sure you have empathy for what the infrastructure team needs. And if you're not focusing on how does that translate in the technology? What is the code that they need to help them? How do you translate that non-technical to technical requirement, focusing on security, not compliance as a checkbox activity, but true threat modeling and security, and making sure infrastructure has what they need to go fast. That's the only way to go fast and stay safe at the same time.
I'll add another anecdote on that, right? Like sometimes as security teams, we have the tendency to really just look at any security issue as a big issue and chase all things, homogeneously, right? What we've had to do was take a step back and say, what is really important? To your point about threat modeling, right? Like, hey, for a particular piece of red that gets surfaced, right? What are the issues? What are the impacts, right? What actually gets affected? What is at risk of loss here? Yeah. And really peel back, because we have to understand, back to the empathy point, right? That we cannot solve every compliance checkbox issue with the same priority as something that's an urgent security issue that might lead to actual data loss, actual compromise of the environment. So we took a stand on, really prioritizing issues that we were seeing in these cloud environments from the lens of operations, from the lens of active threats, and saying, hey, these things that present immediate and present danger to the bank, we will address first. We will focus the limited capacity that our platform teams and application teams have on fixing those issues first. Compliance, we'll get to it, right? We have SLAs for everything.
Yeah.
But, what is important, like figuring out as an organization what is critical versus what is important for compliance is going to be important for denoising the world of cloud security issues for you.
And that's again where we also partner, because it's not applying the risk lens to what is material and what is non-material. It's also playing around well with our other organizations like the lines of defense. Because me and Ajish can agree on certain things, but end of the day, it's a collective one where all the lines of defense, us as engineers, our risk management team and the audit team all need to be on the same page and apply the same lens, because otherwise then you create another conflict. So in my mind, education on cloud risk and controls across the board is equally important. It's just not security and infrastructure. We need to bring other participants in as well, including legal and procurement. So just wanted to highlight that as well.
Yeah, I want to highlight too, 230 years of experience. Like, this doesn't change overnight. I think you touched on it, education. And if those of you that don't know about Cloud Audit Academy, it's a really great program. There's some free e-learning available through training and certification, specifically focused on those that are doing cloud audit and need to understand, because education doesn't reach all the depths sometimes within a large organization that it should, because even though the two of you are aligned, you may have somebody on the audit team who hasn't been brought up to speed on cloud and how to look at things in a cloud environment. So that's a free resource if that's helpful. I want to talk about tooling, because I know I talked earlier, we talked a little bit about some control tower implementation, but in a multi-cloud environment, like, tooling has been really key for you to get to this point in your journey. So I don't know who wants to start, but let's talk about tooling or AWS services that you're finding value in.
I can start off on this one. Okay. So, to the point about multi-cloud, right? We have used as much as possible of the individual CSP's tooling, right? So we set about solving security problems as a whole, right? We look at everything from application security to platform security, cloud security, our logging, monitoring, incident response capabilities, and take a holistic view of how do we enable these core security capabilities in each of these cloud environments. The approach we took was really to start synthesizing central panes of glass for security issues across our cloud environments. We leaned into AWS native, Azure native security tools, started there. How do we enable basic alerts, basic monitoring on those tools? How do we look at basic compliance requirements within these pipelines? How do we centralize all that information so that we can produce consolidated visibility for the organization as we look to resolve this consistently across all environments? So we use tools that map across both our cloud and on-premise environments, and we started bringing those issues in and use it as a central funnel to send issues not just to the platform teams and application teams that we need to partner with to resolve those issues, but also to our operations organizations that are responsible for ensuring the operational security of those environments. And we've gone beyond the cloud, so to speak. We look at this as the way security is going, right? Because of the number of platforms and environments that are proliferating and the number and degree of technical control you need to have over each of them, having these central panes of glass that give you centralized visibility, allow you to take a more continuous controls monitoring approach. So we integrate AWS native tools like GuardDuty, like Security Hub, like compliance.
Config? Or, I'm sorry, Audit Manager? No.
Yeah, Audit Manager. Yes, that's it. Sorry, I get lost in the jargon soup of cloud tools as well as Gartnerese on a regular basis. So we've taken an approach where we normalize all of this data. We use tools like JupyterOne to paint a similar picture about cloud and on-premise environments. And then we use that to provide visibility to our executives, to our audit functions about the health of these environments and our controls maturity in these environments. And that's helped us navigate the sprawl and space of cloud tools. Right?
Awesome.
Yeah, I think Ajish covered it, but I just want to also highlight that it's also sometimes fundamentally very important, like in our case, in our journey, we had to define what multi-cloud means to us. Because sometimes people think multi-cloud means that you can deploy the same asset across both clouds, and that's multi-cloud, right? So from our perspective, and it's also sometimes we think these definitions are clear and everybody understands it, but I can guarantee you, if you say, what is multi-cloud, and I give each of you a paper, everybody will have a different view of multi-cloud means, right? So, I mean, a structured way of thinking, just so that we bring people together, is what does multi-cloud mean to you, right? Multi-cloud to us means we are always multi-source, so we can manage the concentration risk, right? So we always have two clouds. Now, multi-cloud does not mean to us that we are cloud agnostic, that we can deploy the same asset across two clouds. So our cloud architecture is more single cloud core versus multi-cloud core, where one application is deployed only on one cloud and not on both clouds. You could do that, but the costs and the operational challenges all of you are aware of is not meaningful. The reason I brought this up is because from a multi-cloud perspective, there is always this aspiration, everybody has, not only the security teams, but even our firewall teams and other teams, to always have a single pane of glass across like 7 things, right? Some cases that's possible, some cases that's not. And it's always a constant debate and discussion between us in terms of what capabilities make sense to be cloud agnostic and what capabilities we have to use from the cloud provider. Because in my mind, the cloud providers are also spending billions of dollars of investments into the tooling they are building. And if I am on the cloud, I don't want to use cloud as a sort of a data center, virtual data center. I want to leverage the capabilities of the cloud provider to the T, right? So there's always this debate. Some cases, like Ajish mentioned, CSPM and others, we have taken a more cloud agnostic approach, even on firewalling, et cetera, between Azure and AWS. On the other cases, our general philosophy is, if the capability is very mature on the cloud, we tend to use that as much, because usually a lot of those capabilities are too much intertwined with all the other cloud constructs within the cloud. So we don't want to create abstractions on top, because it's difficult to maintain, manage, and sustain those abstractions. But in certain cases, it makes sense, which is where Ajish highlighted that areas where we use cloud agnostic tooling.
Yeah, this is where we look at security as a product portfolio, right?
Right.
So we're looking at components that feed into a macro product.
Yeah.
We're looking at security, like not just within each of these cloud landing zones, but security as things come back into our on-premise environment, security as things go across clouds, security as our identity infrastructure,
Yes.
aligns and attaches to each of these pieces of cloud tooling, as each of these applications that are deployed in multiple different patterns across the fabric of our multi-hybrid cloud architecture, as they're launched out. How does security really transit and transverse all of these different environments? And how do we build a product that captures those security requirements? What components do we build? What components do we adopt that are cloud native? What components do we get from vendors and cobble together? What makes sense from a product architecture perspective?
I like this. Security as a product, or security as a product feature, takes security out of the cost center bucket and moves it into another bucket. Anyway, I wanted to thank you both again for your willingness to share your story. I know you're still in the middle of it. You're working towards greater and greater maturity every day. I wanted to share a little bit more information with those of you in the audience. If you'd like to connect with me and my team, that's the center barcode. If you want to learn more about Control Tower, that's the barcode on the far left, and then all of our AWS management and governance services. Oops, I guess I could go back there for a second. So that's some more resources for you. And then, like I mentioned, we're going to conclude this part, but we'll be over here on the right. Would love to answer any of your questions and hope to connect with you outside the event. Thank you.